The call is for a game changer. I don't think the governor wants one, so I'm not sure where that leaves us. Larry Girouard returns to the set. He is from the Rhode Island Taxpayers Association, a very important good government group, kind of a watchdog team, and some really bright minds in this organization. And he recently penned off an op-ed piece that appeared in the Providence Journal that asked, where is the game changer? Well, he'll come here and ask where the game changer is. Not too impressed with the governor's budget and its priorities because it seems to lack a game changer. Yes, it does. I think she has said she doesn't want one. But we'll have the conversation anyway. The governor will be here on Tuesday of next week for a full conversation, and I think, meaning the whole show, and we'll be talking about game changing and other things, I can promise you. How are you? Good Thursday evening to you. Dan York, State of Mind. Thanks for tuning in. To the rundown we go. We'll take a look at a couple of items I've got some thoughts on tonight. Yes, taking responsibility, the president did today. Unfortunately, it was refreshing in a very sad type of way. In Warwick City Hall and with the firefighter union, we've got some of that, and we need to talk about it because it's a very serious matter. The 195/Pawsock/Providence Stadium / conversation is getting messier, not cleaner, and there have been some developments on that, and we will talk about that as well. Jim Langevin's moving his cyber bill along. He was here a couple of weeks ago talking about what keeps him up at night. We'll tell you about the progress there. And the NFL sort of comes to a final resolution on what to do with all those hurt and sick football players. Your state of mind is important to us, so we'll see what you have to say. Let's dig in. Taking responsibility, yeah, look, this is a terrible story. One American, one Italian dead in a drone strike that, well, didn't say they were there. Here's the headline. The president stepped up, talked about it today, looking somber, and, well, he was, appropriately so. Here's what CBS filed.
President Obama apologized this morning for a U.S. drone strike that killed 2 hostages, including an American.
I profoundly regret what happened. On behalf of the United States government, I offer our deepest apologies.
The Obama administration is conducting a review of the strikes. The Weinstein family released a statement saying, quote, "We look forward to the results of that investigation, but those who took Warren captive over 3 years ago bear ultimate responsibility."
Well, no kidding. And ask me if they're crying a river over it. No. Al-Qaeda certainly isn't. Warren Weinstein was a humanitarian, did great work out there, was captured in 2011, and met his demise this way. Life's not fair, no doubt about it. The family gets closure, but an awful way to do it. Give the president credit. On this, he stepped up and took full responsibility for it. Really no choice in the matter, but at least he did all the right things here. Next item. All the right things missing in the city of Warwick. Holy cow, under the concept of thuggish behavior. So you got to read the story. If you don't get the paper and you can't buy it at a newsstand, go online and look up the Warwick Beacon. Headline, CVS answers firefighters boycott over Cushman. Union president threatens statewide national action. This is a disgrace. This story is an absolute, no doubt, disgrace. So here's what happened. Bob Cushman is this guy who's a former city councilor and school committee chairman. He's been on the show before. Bright guy. He's very concerned about public financing, pensions, and the like. And so after petitioning the Warwick City Council on some pivotal end-of-year financial decisions, he was allowed to speak in front of the council and made a presentation, PowerPoint. They had some trouble. They wouldn't let him put up a screen, but he used the screen. Anyway, it was a little messy. But the firefighters showed up en masse and I guess heckled him throughout. And if you watch the video, you can go to City Hall. I think Ustream has it. I'm not sure if we're authorized. We'll check. And if I can follow and get this for a show in the future, I want to show you this nonsense. With the firefighter union president walking behind Mr. Cushman as he makes this lengthy presentation to the Warwick City Council on finances and all of that. You know, he's walking around him like this behind him, just kind of, stalking him from behind, which is something that is absolutely unacceptable behavior, intimidating. That's why people don't step up to public microphones and offer their opinions on public issues, because they're afraid of that kind of intimidation. But it wasn't just the stalking at the meeting that satisfied the union president, the firefighter union president in Warwick. He writes to CVS, who happens to employ Mr. Cushman as a full-time financial analyst, and threatens to boycott CVS products. And all the firefighters are doing so as well. CVS gets the letter and says, really? Calls Mr. Cushman in, as the story goes, reviews the meeting tapes and everything else, finds that Mr. Cushman, while he mentioned he worked for CVS as a financial analyst trying to establish credibility for his financial evaluation, CVS rightly pointed out that he wasn't representing CVS. He did his own thing on his own time with his own First Amendment right, and they're not worried about it. And they said to the union, I don't know what you're doing here boycotting us. We support firefighters. I'm paraphrasing. It's a disgrace. And nobody steps up. The mayor of Warwick says nothing about it other than, well, you know, we don't condone it, but I need to point out the union can do its own business, paraphrase. Scott Avedisian is showing a level of political cowardice that is unfortunately too typical of him, the city of Warwick, and frankly, the entire state of Rhode Island when it comes to standing up for the average, everyday constituents' need and right to speak their mind without fear of retaliation or intimidation. And to be honest with you, there's nobody in this state that will stand up and say the right thing about this. I went on for about 3 hours on this on the radio today on WPRO, weekdays noon to 3. I'm exhausted, but we'll be back to this. We're not done with this. Someone's got to stand up and say, enough of this. And here's what I don't get. Can I just say this? Firefighters, we want to love you. How can we love you when you act this way? How? Next item. Messy process. It is. It is. The Commerce Board the other day, I showed you this headline already this week, authorized a couple of $150,000 consultant deals on A, the vision for 195 land dormant in the city, and B, a stadium consultant hinged to this. And it bothered one member of the board, Carl Wadenston, who abstained from the vote. He told me on the radio yesterday on WPRO why, because they were hinged together, and he was uncomfortable with that.
The vote came up so quick. There was a lot of discussion, but all of a sudden the vote came up, and I was trying to amend the motion on the floor to get some kind of clarity, to get scope, get why are we doing this, what are the hinge pins to it, potentially separate the two out. And then the vote came, and they said, Carl, how do you vote? And I looked up, and I said, no vote, because we really need to get a strategy. For the land, we didn't need them both in the same bundle. We don't need them.
Which makes you feel like there's a fait accompli to the stadium deal getting done. And while it may very well get done, and the numbers may change from the public discussion the Paw Sox have made, which is a net $4 million cash flow from the state in addition to free land, in addition to no taxes on the land, you know, we'll keep an open mind as to how this whole thing goes, but it almost feels like the locomotive's running at a high pace right now. And the governor has not brought a lot of order to this process, and she needs to. Again, we'll talk to her about that coming up on Tuesday here as she sits in for the full show. I just heard coming in on WPRO Radio News that the 195 Commission itself will be hearing from the Paw Sox in a closed meeting on Monday regarding the business offer, I guess. Stay tuned. Jim Langevin, our 2nd District Congressman, has been working on the Protecting Cyber Networks Act. He talked about it with me a couple of Fridays ago. The act requires the Director of National Intelligence to establish procedures to encourage private businesses to pass along cyber threat information to the federal government. This legislation also calls for the establishment of safeguards to make sure information may not be used to gain an unfair competitive advantage. That from WPRI.com. He talked about it.
We are probably the nation that is most dependent and uses the internet the most of any other nation on the planet. And with that, we are extremely vulnerable. It's the thing that keeps me up late at night, and I'm hoping that that we can take steps to close those apertures of vulnerability.
And today it passed in the House by a vote of 307 to 116. On to the Senate it goes. The football players. The number is unbelievable. The concussions, the Alzheimer's, the head injury, all of that. Headline on ESPN.com. Now it could be $1 billion that they put away the cap was 700 million-ish, and now it's been extended to no real cap, depending on the condition that you're in. Here's a CBS summary of what this settlement's about.
With the settlement, the NFL hopes it can start to move on, saying, quote, retirees and their families will be eligible for prompt and substantial benefits and will avoid years of costly litigation.
I think this whole settlement just reeks of being sinister.
Brent Boyd was an offensive lineman for the Minnesota Vikings for 7 seasons. Now 58, he has early onset dementia and Alzheimer's. Under the deal, Boyd and other players with Alzheimer's would receive a maximum amount of $3.5 million. Same for Parkinson's. Those with ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease are eligible for up to $5 million. But no checks will be issued by the NFL if any of its 20,000 retirees decide to appeal the settlement, a process that could take months or even years to resolve.
Think about that, any of its retirees. Do you know that 6,000 of the 20,000 NFL retirees have some kind of related problem to this? Look, they took the risk, but in the old days, they just kept putting them back in after they had head injuries, which was no good. It does make you feel kind of creepy. We're such avid football fans, and in a way, we're enablers. It's a big conversation. Your state of mind is important to us. 228-1886 is the number. You can email me or Facebook post. Here is a tweet from Rhode Island Republican, or the reverse. You went easy on the guy the other night. He doesn't get that progressive policies got Rhode Island into this economic mess. Yes, Sam Bell was here. He's the executive director of the Progressive Democrats. Hey, listen, we need to hear everybody's voice. Doesn't mean we have to agree. Maybe they ought to take some notes at Warwick about that. The big game changer. Where is it next? I have to tell you, I was thrilled when I saw this headline the other day in the Providence Journal. Here it is, asking where's the game changer. I said, hey, we got to get Larry back in here because I'm exhausted asking the question. I have been weighted out by this governor. She doesn't believe that there's a game changer strategy that ought to be employed by the state of Rhode Island to lift us into whatever is the definition of going forward. Welcome. Nice to have you.
Nice to be here, Dave.
Rhode Island Taxpayers Association is the organization that you are the president of. What is your intent in writing this piece, and what do you mean by game changer?
Okay, when the governor in her inaugural address, and I'll just read one quick quote. She said, we've been 49th among states where companies want to do business, and we're dead last for helping entrepreneurs. I mean, it's a pretty sobering statement, and I never heard a leading candidate say that, or elected official. Then she had an interview with Catherine Gregg, and she said Rhode Island is the second highest in the nation in Medicare spending, second highest in fire safety per thousand personal income, third highest in public employee compensation, and on and on and on. So I had expected, when the budget came out, to see some real game, something that addresses these kind of things head on, that says Rhode Island is going to change. You know, we have a new Speaker of the House, we have a new governor, excited about change. We're last in everything, or almost everything. Our brand is terrible. And budget comes out and not that exciting, that I could see.
She believes you got to pick at certain different areas. She believes that some of her investment that the budget calls for will be targeted to specific types of industrial, educational growth, all that kind of thing. I mean, listen, I don't mean to laugh. I just, there is no thing to be able to say, oh, I get it now. This is what we're going to do.
One of the key
What do you want to do?
One of the key things that leadership, from my perspective, must do is, once you identify what the reality of our state is, where we are, which now has been punctuated, it says we have to do something significant to get the attention not only of the electorate here, but of people outside the state who might want to move here. And when you don't see anything big, you know, you talk about the big idea all the time.
I've stopped.
No, you can't. All right, you stopped, but I mean,
For a while.
big idea.
I needed a break. I keep talking about big ideas. She's saying there is no big idea.
Well, when you look, the big idea is looking at the data that's been presented and saying, we recognize this data, we know it's real, and now we're going to address each one of these in an overt way, communicating with the electorate that we're going to do this, this, and this. It's not all going to happen in 1 year. It might be a 2, 3, or 4 year plan, but here is our plan to move Rhode Island up the competitive ladder so that right now we're not competitive.
she thinks she has one.
Well, let me ask you something. I know you're supposed to interview me, but what's the big headlines in the budget? What's the Taylor Swift tax? The tax on medical insurance? Those are the big headlines. Those are taxes.
Well, she would suggest that the Medicaid changes she's trying to make and try to puree the efficiency of Medicaid, which I think you probably think is a good idea.
That's a big one.
I think it's a good idea. But I'm not here to defend the governor's budget. I thought, I too, when I see her on Tuesday and she'll be sitting in your chair, I'll be asking her about some of these questions. But this philosophy that it's a long fix, whatever it is, going forward, her word, which is undefined, and a lack of branding opportunity for the state leave me in the same perplexed position that you are, Larry. I mean, it seems to me that we can't overthink this thing. We are not competitive with our neighbors. Wouldn't that be the game changer, that we just say everything that we tax and regulate will be an nth less in Rhode Island, open for business because we can beat our neighbors? That would be a game changer for me, not to get into my big idea.
Well, that's certainly a start with the dialogue. I mean, you drive into Rhode Island and you see a sign, I know, to Discover Rhode Island.
Beautiful Rhode Island.
And you'd think that that would be beautifully landscaped and things
Grass
like that.
up to here and garbage all over the place. But you brought a map, or you brought a. I like having visuals. Steve, can we throw up the visual?
Yeah.
What is this?
Last year I was on your show and I presented a lot of data, a lot of the data that the governor presented already, and I plotted the data on the standard deviation curve, which is basically the Rhode Island is over on the left, and that's where we are. That's our competitive position. We're dead last, and the goal is how do you climb that curve and get over the top where we're competitive? And in order to do that from leadership standpoint, not just the governor, but the House and the Senate, what are we going to do to move Rhode Island up that curve where we're competitive? I've said before, we're losing people, we're losing businesses, we're at the risk of losing a House seat in 2020 because our population is not growing relative to the rest of the country.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's bothered by that. I mean,
Well,
you know, this whole,
well,
this
it better bother the taxpayers, because at some point in time, the budget keeps going up.
Yeah.
If the taxpayers are leaving, what's going to happen to the rest of us that are left?
Well, you mentioned something before about, you know, people, you know, want to be incentivized to come in, blah, blah, blah. And there's always this discussion of people coming in. I'm beginning to think that really the mover shaker community here doesn't really want anybody to come in.
Well, how does
we
that,
always measure growth by the number of folks that have to come in and invest, and they have to move in. Nobody really
well, what drives an
wants to
economy?
do that.
I mean, we talk about jobs, jobs, jobs. It's the business community that drives jobs, Dan, not government.
Yeah.
So you have to attract business. How do you do that when you're last?
Well, by the way, the Chamber
How do you do that?
Chamber of Commerce is the de facto business community representative. They
I don't
think
un-
they
I don't
think this governor is
understand.
terrific.
I don't understand.
This plan's terrific.
It would seem
They do.
you tell me where the leadership is of the Chambers of Commerce, who represent a lot of the business community in the state. If we're last in business friendliness in the state, I would think that every chamber leader would be up at the State House screaming and yelling on behalf of their members. Where are they? I don't see it.
I don't know. When we come back, we'll try to answer that question. We'll try to find the right camera. We'll try to answer that question. Stay with us. Taxpayers.com. You should read it every day. I do, and you can get on their email list. So it makes it even more user-friendly. They literally send you an email every day with headlines, kind of a news compilation, some of your thoughts. So you guys have been proactive that way. And
Right.
How big's the organization right now, by the way?
We've got about 600 members.
That's important, and that's a good thing. You think there are some game changers on the list, though?
Yeah, I do. I think there's some. What's the definition of a game changer? A game changer is something that the electorate here in Rhode Island and people outside Rhode Island will step back and say, "Whoa, that's interesting. It looks like leadership."
Okay, so what are they? Give me
line
some.
item beta for the government.
I don't know why she hasn't championed that. I don't care if you're left, right, or center. If you're a governor, You want to have a little bit more say in seeing an end product to all the work you've put into the budget, right?
Right. And then,
Yeah, I'm with you.
all right, next one, some teeth in the Ethics Commission. Now, I've heard leadership say we don't have an ethics problem. Maybe we don't have one right now, but we certainly have had one for the last 10 or 12 years.
We got a House Speaker who's the lead opponent of a formal Ethics Commission upgrade. Poor Nick is missing some concepts. I mean, he owns a building that he leases in part to the Cranston Fire Department, I learned this week. Why would you put yourself in a fiduciary relationship with an organization that represents such a key, tense argument on financial issues and legislative issues? When you don't recognize those things, like they're as plain as the nose in your face, whatever. But I agree, the governor, needs to start arguing more for
ethics,
that,
in
right?
my mind, threads everything we do in our state. And if we have a good ethics performance, that certainly will attract business to look at our state more seriously. Another
else is
one
on
is
your list?
lean government. And I was really, really excited when they had a big announcement. I tried to go to that program, but I had a conflict at Bibco down in Carl Wadenston's company. And the DEM has had a really good lean model for the last couple of years, and I understand the governor's going to roll that out over the next
Give her
few
credit
years,
for that.
and I think that's fantastic.
That's a good move on her part.
Absolutely fantastic.
So tell me about the Pawsox deal. What's the Rhode Island taxpayers think about this project?
You have the 195 land, which is prime property in Providence, and you're going to spur economic development by moving a baseball stadium 5 miles down the road onto land, which is kind of like, from my perspective, it's kind of the icing on the cake, but they haven't baked the cake yet. So you've got the bling, but nobody's there. If you don't have a vibrant business community, the baseball stadium isn't going to do much for economic development, except it might build a stadium, but that's it.
Jim Skeffington would say, hey, listen, it's parkland anyway for the most part.
It's not all parkland.
Well, it's 4 acres of the 7 they're looking for is parkland. If they can get a waiver from the federal government, it's no skin off anybody's nose, really, and it could be catalytic.
There's no skin off. What about the taxpayers that have to pay $4 million a year for the next 30 years? What about that skin?
I think that part's problematic. You and I
on top of 38 studios, why not?
Yeah. Well, it's not 38 in the sense that at least it's coming at us like a train wreck. We can see what some of the numbers are. At 38, the whole thing was stealth and was the worst disaster we've ever seen. But I get the comparisons. I hate the comparisons, but I get them. Bottom line, what do you want to see happen right now that would be the game changer for Rhode Island in 30 seconds or less?
I would like to see leadership seriously look at the data that's in front of them and start to manage to that data and tell the taxpayers of the state of Rhode Island that we are going to make changes to improve the brand of this state measurably, so that you can look at a future where you have some security going forward and not think that taxes are going to keep going up because we're not focused on the right things.
All right. Well,
That's
we'll share your notes with the governor next week. Just keep plugging, man. Just Larry, keep plugging. Please keep plugging. We need you.
We're trying, Dan.
One more thing when we come back. Stay with me. Hey, tomorrow on the program, we have some terrific people. Jeremy Chiappetta, who runs the Blackstone Valley Prep Charter School, and Dr. Fran Gallo, who's the superintendent of schools in Central Falls. She is a hero. She's the gutsiest public servant I know, or at least in the top 3 or 4. And it's a must-watch tomorrow night. Don't forget Governor Raimondo Tuesday, right here at 7:30 and 11:30. We'll see you on the radio tomorrow on WPRO, noon to 3, and we thank you for watching.